Commander Veltar studied the blue and green planet rotating slowly on his display screen. Earth looked peaceful from here, with its white clouds swirling over vast oceans. The humans who lived there seemed just as peaceful based on all the data his people had collected over the past 50 years. The Zephyrian Confederation had been watching humanity for decades. They had listened to their radio signals, watched their television broadcasts, and monitored their internet communications. What they saw was a species that talked constantly about peace, love, and working together. The humans made movies about friendship conquering evil. They wrote songs about ending wars. They held massive protests whenever their governments wanted to fight. "These creatures are weak," Veltar said to his second-in-command, Officer Krixa. "Look at their history. They spend more time arguing with each other than actually fighting. Even when they do fight, they cry about it afterward and build monuments to remember the dead." Krixa nodded as she reviewed the intelligence reports. Their military forces are small compared to their population. Most of their soldiers have never seen real combat. They use their weapons to keep peace, not to conquer. Other worlds. The humans had spread to 12 star systems over the past century, but they had done it slowly, carefully, always asking permission from the Galactic Council before settling new worlds. They shared their technology freely with other species. They offered medical aid to anyone who asked. They seemed more interested in planting gardens than building fortresses. This made them perfect targets for the Confederation's expansion plans. The Zephyrians had built their empire by conquering weaker species. They would study a target for years, then demand surrender. If the species refused, the Zephyrians would destroy a few military bases and capture some civilians. Most species gave up immediately rather than face total war. It was clean, efficient, and profitable. Humanity controlled several resource-rich worlds in the Tau Ceti system. Those planets had rare metals that the Confederation needed for their expanding fleet. The humans had been mining there for 30 years, but they were terrible at it. They cared more about protecting the local wildlife than extracting maximum profit. They could mine 10 times more efficiently under Zephyrian management. "Send the demand for surrender," Veltar ordered. The message was sent to Earth's government through standard diplomatic channels. It was polite, but firm. "Surrender your colonies in the Tau Ceti system within 30 days or face the consequences." The Confederation offered to relocate all human civilians to other worlds. No one had to die. This was just business. The response came back exactly 30 days later. It was short and simple. "No." Veltar stared at the single word on his screen. He had expected a longer message. Usually species tried to negotiate. They asked for more time, offered compromises, or begged for mercy. But the humans had just said no and nothing else. Perhaps they didn't understand the message, Krixa suggested. "Send it again," Veltar ordered. "Make it clearer." The second message explained exactly what would happen if humanity refused to surrender. The Confederation would destroy their military bases, capture their civilians, and take the colonies by force. Thousands of humans would die or become prisoners. Their peaceful way of life would end forever. Again, the response was the same. No. This time the message was signed by someone called the Terran Defense Council. Veltar had never heard of this organization. According to their intelligence, Earth's government was run by something called the United Nations, which spent most of its time talking and voting on things. The Defense Council wasn't mentioned in any of their reports. It doesn't matter who sent it, Veltar decided. They've made their choice. Begin the operation. The Confederation fleet moved into the Tau Ceti system with overwhelming force. 200 warships surrounded the 3 human research stations. The stations were small, lightly defended structures that studied the local planets and moons. Each one held about 500 researchers, scientists, and support staff. The attack began at dawn, local time. Zephyrian fighters swept in fast and destroyed the station's few defensive weapons. Then boarding parties took control of each facility. The whole operation took less than 4 hours. Not a single Zephyrian was killed or even seriously wounded. The humans barely fought back. Their security guards surrendered quickly when they saw how outnumbered they were. The scientists and researchers offered no resistance at all. They just stood quietly as Zephyrian soldiers rounded them up and put them on transport ships. "This is easier than we expected," Crixa reported. "We now control all 3 stations and have captured 1,847 human prisoners. Should we proceed to the main colonies?" Veltar was about to give the order when something strange happened. Every human in the captured stations began laughing. Not the nervous laughter of frightened prisoners, but genuine amusement. They laughed as if someone had told them a very funny joke. "What are they doing?" Veltar demanded. One of the human prisoners, a middle-aged woman in a scientist's uniform, was brought to the command center. She was still smiling when the guards forced her to her knees. "Why are you laughing?" Veltar asked her in broken human English. The woman looked up at him with bright, intelligent eyes. "Because you have no idea what you just did. We conquered your stations. We captured your people. Your government will surrender to save your lives." The woman's smile grew wider. "Our government? You mean the politicians? They don't control what happens next." She paused, still grinning. "You attacked Earth's children, our researchers, our scientists, our future. You took them prisoner. Yes, and now your people will give us what we want to get them back." The woman started laughing again, harder this time. "You really don't understand us at all, do you? You think because we talk about peace that we can't fight? You think because we try to avoid war that we don't know how to win one?" Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the woman's confidence bothered him, but he pushed the feeling aside. The operation was going perfectly. Soon Earth would surrender and the Confederation would have its new colonies. "Your threats mean nothing," he told the woman. "Your military is weak. Your people are soft. You will surrender rather than watch these prisoners die." The woman stopped laughing and looked directly into Veltar's eyes. "We tried to be peaceful because peace is better than the alternative. But you've made your choice. Now you'll learn what the alternative looks like." She was dragged away, but her words echoed in the command center. Several Zephyrian officers looked uncomfortable. They had studied human culture for years, but they had focused only on the peaceful parts. They had ignored humanity's long history of warfare because they assumed those days were over. Hours passed with no response from Earth. The Confederation sent messages demanding surrender, but received only silence. No angry broadcasts, no desperate negotiations, no pleas for mercy. Nothing. "Perhaps they're preparing their response," Crixa suggested. But Veltar was beginning to worry. In all their previous conquests, the target species had responded immediately. Fear made them act quickly, often foolishly. But the humans were doing something different. They were staying calm, staying quiet. It was as if they were thinking, planning, preparing. The silence stretched into days, then weeks. The captured humans remained cheerful and confident, as if they knew something their captors didn't. They answered questions about their technology and defenses, but they did it with the same mysterious smiles. Finally, after a full month of silence, a message came from Earth. It wasn't from any government or military organization. It was from something called the Terran Defense Council, and it was addressed to the entire Zephyrian Confederation. The message had only 5 words. "You should have stayed away." Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center buried 3 kilometers below the Swiss Alps. The massive room buzzed with activity as hundreds of officers worked at their stations. Wall-sized displays showed star maps, fleet positions, and production schedules. The air tasted metallic from all the electronic equipment running at full power. "Status report," Chen ordered. Colonel Martinez, her chief of staff, stepped forward with a tablet full of data. "All outer colonies are evacuating as planned. The civilian transports are moving toward the inner systems. We expect complete evacuation within 6 weeks." Chen nodded. The Terran Defense Council had activated Protocol Omega the moment the Zephyrians attacked the research stations. Most people had never heard of the Defense Council because it wasn't supposed to exist during peacetime. It was humanity's emergency government, created in secret 50 years ago when they first detected hostile alien signals from deep space. The politicians who ran the United Nations believed in peace and cooperation. They were good people with good intentions. But the Defense Council knew that not everyone in the galaxy shared those values. While diplomats talked about friendship between species, military planners prepared for the day when talking wouldn't be enough. "What about the shipyards?" Chen asked. "All hidden facilities are now operational," Martinez replied. "Luna Base Omega is running at maximum production. The asteroid belt yards are adding 3 new ships per day. The outer system facilities are working around the clock." Chen smiled grimly. The Zephyrians thought they knew everything about humanity's military capabilities. They were wrong. They had seen the small defense fleets that protected trade routes and patrolled colony borders. They had counted the handful of military bases on inhabited worlds. But they had missed the real preparation. For 50 years, humanity had been building in secret. They had hollowed out asteroids and turned them into weapons factories. They had built shipyards inside gas giant moons where no one would look. They had created the largest military-industrial complex in galactic history, all hidden from prying alien eyes. The best part was that none of it violated any galactic treaties. The laws said species couldn't build offensive weapons or maintain large standing armies. But they said nothing about having the ability to build those things quickly if needed. Humanity had followed the letter of the law while completely ignoring its spirit. "Dr. Webb's team is ready to begin field testing," Martinez continued. Chen walked over to another display that showed research labs scattered across a dozen worlds. Dr. Marcus Webb had been working on something he called asymmetric warfare doctrine. The idea was simple. If you couldn't match an enemy's strength, you had to be smarter, faster, and more unpredictable. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as persistence hunters. They didn't kill prey with claws or fangs. Instead, they chased animals until the creatures collapsed from exhaustion. They were patient, determined, and absolutely relentless. These same traits made them terrifying opponents in space combat. "The Zephyrians fight like most military species," Webb had explained in his briefings. "They use overwhelming force to achieve quick victories. They expect their enemies to either surrender immediately or fight conventional battles they can win. But humans don't think like that. We're willing to lose every battle if it helps us win the war." Chen switched to another display that showed the Tau Ceti system. The Zephyrian fleet was still there, apparently expecting Earth to surrender. They had captured more research stations and were building bases on several planets. Their confidence was almost insulting. "Any word from our people in the prison camps?" Chen asked. "Yes, ma'am. They're all in good health and spirits. The Zephyrians are treating them well because they still expect to trade them for surrender terms." Chen's expression hardened. The aliens had made a crucial mistake. They thought they understood human psychology because they had studied human culture. But culture was just the surface layer of what humans really were. Underneath all the peace talks and cooperation treaties was something much older and more dangerous. Humans were pack hunters. Attack one member of the pack and you face the entire group. Take humans prisoner, and their families would move heaven and earth to get them back. Threaten human children, and even the most peaceful human would become a weapon of revenge. The Zephyrians had captured researchers, scientists, and support staff. But to humanity, those weren't just prisoners. They were sons and daughters, mothers, and fathers, friends, and colleagues. Every single one of them had people who loved them and would do anything to bring them home. "Begin Phase 2, Chen ordered. Across human space, the hidden factories increased production even more. New designs that had existed only as blueprints were rushed into construction. Weapons that had never been tested were loaded onto ships that had never seen combat. Crews who had trained in simulators their whole lives prepared to face real enemies. But the most important preparation was happening in the prison camps themselves. Captain Elena Rodriguez had been the head of security at Research Station Gamma when the Zephyrians attacked. Now she was a prisoner in a camp on the planet Kethmar. But she wasn't just sitting around feeling sorry for herself. The Zephyrians were efficient captors, but they weren't paranoid enough. They had studied human culture and decided that humans were naturally cooperative and peaceful. This made them relaxed around their prisoners. They allowed humans to work together, to share information, and to move relatively freely within the camps. What they didn't realize was that every human in the camps was a trained observer. The researchers had spent their lives studying alien worlds, which meant they knew how to learn quickly in unfamiliar environments. The scientists were experts at gathering data and drawing conclusions. The support staff included engineers, technicians, and logistics specialists who understood how complex systems worked. Working together, the human prisoners were learning everything about their captors. They studied Zephyrian technology, military procedures, and cultural weaknesses. They memorized guard rotations, supply schedules, and communication protocols. They identified critical systems and defensive vulnerabilities. Most importantly, they were preparing to fight back. The Zephyrians had made another mistake. They assumed that because humans seemed peaceful, they didn't know how to be violent when necessary. But every human child learned about their species' history in school. They knew about the world wars, the revolutions, and the countless conflicts that had shaped their civilization. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had developed strategies, tactics, and weapons that no other species had ever imagined. They understood warfare at a level that went far beyond simple force and aggression. Now all that knowledge was being put to use against humanity's enemies. Rodriguez gathered her team in one of the camp's maintenance areas. 23 humans, each with different skills and specialties, all united by a single purpose: escape and revenge. "The supply ship comes in 3 days," she whispered. "That's our window. Teams Alpha and Beta will take the communication center. Team Gamma goes for the armory. Delta Team handles the power systems." "What about the guards?" asked Dr. Patel, a xenobiologist who had become their expert on Zephyrian biology. "Leave them alive if possible," Rodriguez replied. "We want information, not just destruction. But don't hesitate if they try to stop us. We're going home one way or another." The other prisoners nodded. They had been planning this for weeks, ever since they realized that Earth wasn't going to surrender. Their families, their friends, their entire species was preparing for war. The least they could do was cause some trouble for the enemy. But their real job wasn't to escape. It was to gather intelligence and wait for the signal, because sooner or later, the Terran Defense Fleet would come for them. And when it did, the galaxy would learn what happened when humans decided that talking time was over. Above them, in the cold vacuum of space, the Zephyrian fleet continued its patrol routes. The aliens were confident in their victory. They had captured strategic positions, defeated human forces, and faced no serious resistance. They had no idea that across a dozen star systems, humanity was preparing to show them the difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight. Commander Veltar was reviewing supply reports when his communication officer suddenly went pale and started shaking. "Sir," the young Zephyrian stammered, "you need to see this immediately." The main display screen flickered and changed to show Earth's moon. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. Luna looked the same as it always had, gray, cratered, and lifeless. But then something impossible began to happen. The moon started to crack open. Long lines of light appeared across Luna's surface, glowing brighter and brighter until they were visible from space. The cracks widened, revealing that they weren't cracks at all. They were massive doors, each one larger than most space stations. And from inside those doors, ships began to emerge. Not just a few ships, thousands of them. The vessels that rose from Luna's hidden depths were unlike anything the Zephyrians had seen before. They were sleek, angular, and black as space itself. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with a grace that suggested advanced technology and careful engineering. "How many?" Veltar whispered, barely able to speak. "Still, counting, sir," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "Current estimate is over 3,000 ships and still rising." But Luna was just the beginning. Across the solar system, asteroids that had seemed ordinary for decades suddenly revealed their true nature. Rocky surfaces split apart to show hidden shipyards underneath. Giant space stations uncloaked themselves from behind gas giants. Secret bases that had been invisible to sensors announced their presence with massive energy signatures. The human military had been hiding in plain sight for half a century. On the planet Kethmar, Captain Rodriguez felt the ground shake beneath her feet. She looked up at the sky and saw something that made her heart race with joy. A human ship was burning through the atmosphere, its hull glowing red from re-entry heat. "That's our signal," she announced to her fellow prisoners. The uprising began simultaneously across 17 Zephyrian prison camps. The humans had spent months learning their captors' weaknesses, studying their routines, and preparing for this moment. They moved with coordination that surprised even themselves. At Camp 7 on the moon of Drakhai, Dr. Sarah Kim led a team of scientists in taking control of the facility's power systems. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of using the prisoners as technical support staff, which meant the humans knew exactly how everything worked. "Cut power to the guard towers first," Kim ordered as her team worked at the control panels. "Then lock down the armory. We want them confused, not dead." The Zephyrians were completely unprepared for organized resistance from their prisoners. They had assumed that humans were too peaceful and cooperative to cause real trouble. They were wrong. At Camp 12, Professor Chen used his knowledge of xenobiology to create a sleeping gas from the camp's medical supplies. Within minutes, half the guards were unconscious. The rest were too confused to mount effective resistance. At Camp 3, Engineer Martinez had figured out how to override the communication systems. He sent detailed intelligence reports to the approaching human fleet, while his teammates secured the prisoners and subdued their guards. The prison breaks weren't just random acts of rebellion. They were coordinated military operations designed to gather intelligence and create chaos behind enemy lines. Every human prisoner had a specific role to play, and they executed their parts with frightening efficiency. But the real shock came when the Zephyrian High Command tried to contact their fleet in the Tau Ceti system. They expected to coordinate a defense against the human ships emerging from Luna. Instead, they found their communications cut and their sensors jammed. Admiral Chen's first strike fleet had been operating in secret for weeks. While the Zephyrians focused on their captured prison camps and occupied colonies, human ships had been infiltrating the outer edges of their territory. They used advanced stealth technology and careful planning to avoid detection. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the destroyer Swift Vengeance as it emerged from behind Tau Ceti's largest moon. Her ship was one of 50 vessels that had been waiting for this moment. They had studied the Zephyrian fleet's patrol patterns, identified weaknesses in their formations, and prepared detailed attack plans. "All ships, this is Rodriguez," she announced over the tactical network. "Remember, we're not here to trade shots with their main fleet. Hit the supply ships, the communication arrays, and the command centers. Make them blind and hungry." The human attack was nothing like traditional space combat. Instead of massive fleet engagements with thousands of ships firing at each other, the humans used speed, stealth, and precision strikes. They appeared without warning, destroyed specific targets, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. Zephyrian patrol ships found their sensors jammed and their communications cut. Supply convoys discovered that their escort vessels had vanished without a trace. Command posts lost contact with their outlying bases one by one. "They're not fighting fair," complained Veltar, as his staff tried to make sense of the tactical situation. "Fighting fair is for sports, not war," replied one of the human prisoners who had been brought to the command center for questioning. The woman smiled as explosions lit up the sky outside the windows. "We tried being nice. You didn't listen." The Yao human strategy was becoming clear. They weren't trying to win a single decisive battle. Instead, they were systematically destroying the Zephyrian fleet's ability to operate as a coordinated force. They cut supply lines, jammed communications, and eliminated key personnel. They turned the Confederation's size and complexity into weaknesses rather than strengths. But the most terrifying aspect of the human assault was its scale. Intelligence reports were coming in from across Zephyrian space, all telling the same story. Human ships were appearing everywhere at once. They seemed to have an unlimited number of vessels and crews. "How is this possible?" demanded General Krixa during an emergency meeting of the Confederation leadership. Our intelligence showed that humanity had fewer than 200 military ships total. Our intelligence was wrong, replied Admiral Velnox, the Confederation's chief military strategist. Either they built this fleet impossibly fast, or they've been hiding it from us for decades. The truth was both simpler and more frightening than the Zephyrians realized. Humanity had indeed been building in secret for 50 years. But they had also done something no other species had ever attempted. They had created a completely civilian industrial base that could be converted to military production at a moment's notice. Every human colony had factories that normally produced farming equipment, construction materials, and household goods, but those same factories could retool their production lines in a matter of days to manufacture weapons, armor, and spacecraft components. Every civilian shipyard that built cargo vessels and passenger liners could switch to producing warships, with minimal modifications. The Confederation had been watching humanity's military forces, while completely ignoring their industrial capacity. It was like counting enemy soldiers while ignoring their weapons factories. Dr. Webb's asymmetric warfare doctrine was proving devastatingly effective. The humans didn't try to match Zephyrian strength with strength. Instead, they used their advantages, adaptability, industrial capacity, and the willingness to take risks that more conservative species wouldn't consider. "Sir," Veltar's communication officer called out, his voice barely controlled panic. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it through," Veltar ordered, though he dreaded what he might hear. The screen showed a human woman in a military uniform. She had gray hair and calm, intelligent eyes that seemed to look directly at Veltar despite the vast distance between them. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet," she said. "You have attacked our people and taken them prisoner. You have occupied our territory and threatened our worlds. You believed that humanity would not retaliate because we prefer peace to war." Chen paused, and the camera pulled back to show that she was standing on the bridge of a massive warship. Through the viewports behind her, thousands of other ships were visible in formation. "You were wrong," Chen continued. "We are coming for our people. We are coming for our territory. And we are coming for you. You have one chance to avoid total destruction. Release all human prisoners immediately. Withdraw all forces from human space and surrender unconditionally. You have 24 hours to respond." The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian command center in stunned silence. "How many ships did you count in that formation?" Veltar asked quietly. His tactical officer checked his instruments twice before answering. "At least 10,000, sir. Possibly twice that number." For the first time since the campaign began, Veltar felt genuine fear. Humanity had revealed the true scope of their military power, and it was beyond anything the Confederation had imagined possible. The species they had dismissed as weak and peaceful had just declared war on the entire Zephyrian Confederation. And based on what they had seen so far, the humans might actually be able to win. The space around Kethvar, the Zephyrian homeworld, had been quiet for 3 centuries. The planet's orbital defense platforms had never fired a shot in anger. The system's early warning sensors existed mainly to track cargo ships and passenger liners. War was something that happened in distant star systems, fought by lesser species who lacked the Confederation's wisdom and restraint. All of that changed when 10,000 human warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Indomitable, watching as her massive fleet deployed into attack formation. The sight should have filled her with satisfaction. After months of planning and preparation, humanity was finally ready to strike back against those who had attacked them first. But Chen felt no joy, only grim determination. This wasn't a conquest or an expansion of territory. This was a rescue mission on an unprecedented scale. "All fleet commanders report status," she ordered. The responses came in from across the Armada. Battle Group Alpha, consisting of 2,000 heavy cruisers, was in position near the system's outer planets. Battle Group Beta, with 1,500 destroyers and frigates, had moved to cut off escape routes. The support fleet, cargo ships, medical vessels, and repair stations hung back in a defensive formation. But the most important ships were the specialized rescue vessels that would recover human prisoners from the Zephyrian camps and stations throughout the system. Enemy fleet strength? Chen asked her tactical officer. Approximately 800 warships in various states of readiness, Commander Torres replied. Most of them are moving to form a defensive line around the homeworld. Their battle stations are coming online but slowly. I don't think they expected us to move this fast. Chen nodded. Speed had been crucial to the human battle plan. While the Zephyrians spent weeks debating how to respond to the ultimatum, human forces had been moving into position. They had used the time to study Zephyrian defenses, identify key targets, and prepare for the largest military operation in human history. Open a channel to the Zephyrian High Command, Chen ordered. The main display screen lit up with the image of General Krixha, the military leader who had planned the attack on human space. She looked older than Chen remembered from the intelligence briefings. The stress of the past few months had clearly taken its toll. Admiral Chen, Krixha said formally, I assume you're here to discuss surrender terms. Chen almost smiled at the aliens' continued arrogance. Even facing a fleet 5 times larger than their own, the Zephyrians still believed they were in control of the situation. The only surrender I'm interested in discussing is yours, Chen replied calmly. You have attacked our people, captured our civilians, and occupied our territory. The time for talking is over. You're making a mistake, Krixha insisted. Yes, your fleet is large, but you're far from home. Our reinforcements are coming from 12 different star systems. You can't fight the entire Confederation. We're not here to fight the entire Confederation, Chen said. We're here to rescue our people and teach you a lesson about the consequences of attacking humanity. What happens next depends entirely on your choices. The connection ended, and Chen turned to address her bridge crew. These were the best officers humanity had to offer, drawn from every colony and military academy. Many of them were volunteers who had joined the fleet after hearing about the attacks on the research stations. All stations prepare for Operation Homecoming, Chen announced. Across the human fleet, thousands of crew members made final preparations for battle. Unlike the Zephyrians, who saw war as a tool for conquest and expansion, the humans were fighting for something much more personal. Every ship in the Armada carried crew members who had friends or family in the prison camps. This wasn't about territory or resources. This was about bringing their people home. The battle began not with massive exchanges of weapons fire, but with something the Zephyrians had never seen before. Coordinated electronic warfare on a scale that bordered on science fiction. Dr. Webb's team had spent months studying captured Zephyrian technology. They had learned how the aliens' computers worked, how their communication systems operated, and how their weapons were controlled. Now they put that knowledge to devastating use. Across the Zephyrian fleet, ships suddenly found their sensors jammed, their computers infected with viruses, and their weapons systems locked down by malicious software. Command networks that had operated flawlessly for centuries began crashing one by one. What's happening to our systems? Krixha demanded of her technical staff. Unknown, General, replied the chief engineer. All of our computer networks are under attack simultaneously. It's like they know exactly how our technology works. They did know, because humanity had made it their business to learn. While the Zephyrians studied human culture through intercepted entertainment broadcasts, human scientists had been taking apart every piece of alien technology they could find. They had bought civilian devices through legitimate trade channels, studied crashed ships, and even stolen military hardware when necessary. The result was that humanity knew more about Zephyrian technology than the Zephyrians knew about human capabilities. With the enemy fleet blind and confused, Chen ordered the next phase of the attack. Human ships moved in fast, using their superior coordination to isolate Zephyrian vessels and force them to surrender one by one. But the most impressive part of the operation was happening on the surface of Kethvar and its moons. Special forces. Teams were landing at 17 different prison camps simultaneously, each one guided by intelligence gathered during the previous months of uprisings and escapes. Captain Rodriguez led one of those teams as they approached Camp 7 in stealth dropships. She had been planning this rescue for weeks, ever since escaping from her own prison and joining the fleet. Now she was coming back to save the people she had left behind. "Remember," she told her team over the communication system, "our primary objective is to recover the prisoners safely. Secondary objectives are intelligence gathering and capture of key personnel. We are not here for revenge." It was an important distinction. Human military doctrine emphasized the difference between necessary force and excessive violence. The goal was to win the war quickly and decisively, not to cause unnecessary suffering. The raids on the prison camps were textbook examples of precision military operations. Human forces moved in fast, neutralized guards with non-lethal weapons, when possible, and secured prisoners for immediate evacuation. Within 2 hours, over 15,000 human civilians were back in friendly hands. But the psychological impact of the rescues was even more important than the tactical success. The Zephyrians had been holding those prisoners as bargaining chips, expecting humanity to negotiate for their release. Instead, humanity had simply taken them back by force. "Sir," Commander Torres called out, "we're receiving surrender offers from multiple Zephyrian ships." Chen looked at the tactical display. Nearly half of the enemy fleet had either surrendered or been disabled. The remainder were retreating toward the inner system, but human forces were moving to intercept them. "Accept surrenders from any ship that powers down weapons and engines," Chen ordered. "But make it clear that this is unconditional surrender. We'll discuss terms after all human prisoners have been recovered." The space battle was winding down, but Chen knew the real test was still coming. The Confederation's leadership was gathered on Kethvar, probably planning some kind of last-ditch resistance. They might try to use the planet's civilian population as human shields, or they might attempt to destroy critical infrastructure rather than let it fall into human hands. "Admiral," her communication officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's General Krixa." The alien military leader appeared on screen again, but this time she looked defeated. Her uniform was disheveled, and there were signs of panic in the background behind her. "Admiral Chen," Krixa said formally, "the Confederation Council wishes to discuss terms for a ceasefire." "The time for ceasefires was before you attacked our people," Chen replied. "Now we talk about surrender, unconditional surrender. You're asking us to abandon our entire expansion program, withdraw from dozens of star systems, and accept human oversight of our military forces." "I'm not asking," Chen corrected. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. You can surrender now and negotiate the details later, or we can continue this demonstration of human military capability until you have no choice in the matter." To emphasize her point, Chen had her fleet execute a perfect parade formation maneuver. 10,000 ships moved in precise coordination, their formation spelling out words in humanity's ancient script that translated roughly to unconditional surrender. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just militarily superior. They were organized, disciplined, and capable of feats of coordination that no other species had achieved. This wasn't a lucky victory or a desperate gamble. This was what happened when humanity decided to stop being polite. "We surrender," Krixa said quietly. The words echoed across the Zephyrian communication networks, reaching every ship, every base, and every colony in Confederation space. Within hours, similar surrenders were coming in from across the galaxy as, 6 months after the surrender of the Zephyrian Confederation, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. The same woman who had commanded humanity's largest military fleet now wore diplomatic robes instead of a military uniform, but her eyes still held the quiet confidence of someone who had seen war and chosen peace. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 200 different species took their seats. Many of them had never seen a human in person before. Others had only recently learned that humanity possessed military capabilities beyond anything they had imagined possible. The Galactic Council had existed for over 1,000 years, serving as a forum for peaceful discussion between species. It had no real power to enforce its decisions, relying instead on moral authority and economic pressure to maintain order. That was about to change. Distinguished delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. I stand before you today not as a conqueror, but as a representative of a species that was forced to defend itself against unprovoked aggression. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some delegates nodded in agreement while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone knew what had happened to the Zephyrian Confederation. Their 12-species alliance had been dissolved. Their military forces disbanded and their leaders put on trial for crimes against galactic peace. But the fate of the Confederation wasn't what worried most council members. What worried them was the speed and efficiency with which humanity had accomplished. The Zephyrian attack on human space was not an isolated incident, Chen continued. Our investigation has revealed that they had been planning similar attacks against at least 6 other species. The Vorthon mining colonies, the Kalari research stations, the independent worlds of the Outer Rim, all were marked for conquest, once humanity had been subdued. This was news to many of the delegates. Secret intelligence documents captured during the occupation of Kethvar had revealed the true scope of Confederation ambitions. They hadn't been content with just expanding their territory. They had been planning to reshape the entire galaxy according to their vision of efficient resource management and centralized control. Humanity could have stopped there, Chen said. We could have been satisfied with rescuing our people and destroying the threat to our worlds. But we realized that the Confederation's defeat created a power vacuum that other aggressive species might try to fill. She gestured to the display screens around the chamber, which showed star maps of the former Confederation territory. Dozens of worlds that had been under alien occupation were now independent again, their original inhabitants restored to power. Trade routes that had been restricted to Confederation vessels were now open to all species. Instead of claiming this territory for ourselves, humanity chose to enforce the restoration of rightful sovereignty to all occupied worlds. We have established the Terran protection protocols to ensure that no species will again face the choice between surrender and extinction. The protection protocols were humanity's answer to the galaxy's security problem. Any species that felt threatened by aggressive neighbors could request human military assistance. In exchange, they would agree to certain standards of behavior regarding the treatment of civilians and the conduct of warfare. It was a clever system that gave humanity enormous influence without requiring them to directly control other worlds. They became the galaxy's ultimate guarantor of peace, the species that others called when diplomacy failed and war seemed inevitable. Some of you are concerned about humanity's military capabilities, Chen acknowledged. You wonder if we might become the very threat we claim to protect against. This is a reasonable concern and we have taken steps to address it. She pressed a control, and the display screens changed to show detailed specifications of human military technology. Ship designs, weapon systems, defensive capabilities, information that would normally be classified at the highest levels of secrecy. Humanity pledges complete transparency regarding our military forces, Chen announced. These specifications are being transmitted to all council members right now. You are welcome to inspect our ships, visit our bases, and observe our training exercises. We have nothing to hide because we have nothing to gain from conquest. This was perhaps the most radical aspect of humanity's new approach to galactic politics. Traditional military doctrine emphasized secrecy and deception to maintain tactical advantage. But humanity had decided that transparency was more valuable than surprise. If everyone knew exactly how powerful human forces were, they would be less likely to test that power. If potential aggressors understood the consequences of attacking human allies, they would be more likely to choose negotiation over violence. The strategy was already proving effective. 3 different species had canceled planned military actions against their neighbors after receiving detailed briefings on human capabilities. 2 others had requested human mediation of territorial disputes, rather than risk triggering the protection protocols. We understand that trust must be earned, Chen continued. Words are easy to speak but hard to keep. That is why humanity is establishing the Galactic Peace Institute on Earth, with representatives from every member species. This institute will monitor compliance with the protection protocols and investigate any accusations of human misconduct. The Peace Institute was Dr. Webb's idea, an extension of his asymmetric warfare doctrine applied to diplomacy instead of combat. Instead of relying on superior force to maintain order, humanity would use superior information. They would know about every potential conflict before it started and intervene with economic pressure, diplomatic mediation, or military deterrence as appropriate. But the most important change we propose is this, Chen said, her voice becoming more serious. The Galactic Council must evolve from a discussion forum into a governing body, with real authority to enforce its decisions. The age of species doing whatever they want without consequences must end. This was the proposal that had many delegates worried. A Galactic Council with enforcement authority would have the power to intervene in internal affairs, regulate trade, practices, and even remove governments that violated galactic law. It would represent a fundamental change in how the galaxy was organized. Under humanity's proposal, Chen explained, the Council would have 3 types of authority. First, the power to investigate alleged violations of galactic law. Second, the power to impose economic sanctions against violators. Third, the power to authorize military action as a last resort. She paused to let this sink in. All military action would be carried out by volunteer forces from member species, coordinated by the Terran Defense Fleet. No species would be required to participate in military operations, but all would benefit from the protection this system provides. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates debated the proposal with their advisors. Some species were enthusiastic about the idea of guaranteed protection from aggressive neighbors. Others worried about losing their sovereignty to an Earth-dominated galactic government. Ambassador Kreltalk of the Andromedan Trade Federation raised his hand to speak. What prevents humanity from using this system to impose your values and interests on the rest of us? It was the question everyone had been thinking, but few had been willing to ask directly. Chen had been expecting it. Because our values are your values, she replied simply. The right to exist without fear of conquest. The right to govern your own worlds according to your own traditions. The right to trade freely with whomever you choose. The right to resolve disputes through negotiation rather than violence. She gestured to the display screens again, which now showed footage from the liberated worlds of the former Confederation. Former prisoners working alongside their rescuers, scientists from different species collaborating on research projects, trade ships from dozens of worlds moving freely through space that had been restricted for decades. This is what humanity is fighting to protect, Chen said. Not human dominance, but galactic freedom. Not human empire, but galactic cooperation. We are strong enough to impose our will on all of you, but we choose not to because conquest is not our goal. The debate continued for hours, but Chen could see that opinion was shifting in humanity's favor. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had the power to dominate the galaxy, but was choosing to share it instead. They had defeated the greatest military threat in galactic history, but had used their victory to restore freedom rather than establish an empire. When the final vote came, it wasn't even close. 167 species voted in favor of the new galactic charter, with only 23 opposed and 10 abstaining. The galaxy had chosen peace over chaos, cooperation over competition. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. Building a peaceful galactic order would be much harder than winning a war. It would require patience, wisdom, and constant vigilance to prevent the same mistakes that had led to the Zephyrian crisis. As she left the council chamber, Chen was approached by Ambassador Veltrix of the Centauri Alliance, one of the galaxy's oldest and most respected civilizations. I have one final question, Veltrix said quietly. What happens if humanity